Hi, thank you for being with me. Today I'm recording my synthesis of book 39 in my book week series, Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now, A Guide to Spiritual Enlightenment. This book is incredibly effective at doing a number of things. Eckhart Tolle shares more about his personal pathway in this book, which I very much appreciate. Eckhart Tolle himself experienced a level of depression that seemed to have turned in on itself. It was so painful. And he writes about the evening when he turned toward his pain and was suffering at such a level that his description of it is textured with an incapacitating torture. And the way that I would describe it is that it seems to me that that evening he faced his pain such that he was able to open that doorway at the nucleus of his pain that opened into his enlightenment. And it seems that he has not been the same since. He describes experiencing 5 months of an absolutely shifted consciousness that many describe as a sense of lightness, buoyancy, an ease and capacity to see everything differently, and an opening toward noticing the beauty in all that is manifested, all that is available to our senses, from the space beyond our senses. He explains it very, very well. And then he continues in a question and answer format to explain to us how we might reach that space. And he does it in so many different ways. And it seems to me with the intention to reach as many reflection points as he can. I would absolutely recommend reading this book. There is a treasure to be found on almost every page. I'm going to emphasize a focus topic in this book that doesn't take up much space in this book, but that is really striking to me. I'm on page 102, and I'm going to share my first vocal reading now. Already, for most humans, the only respite they find from their own minds is to occasionally revert to a level of consciousness below thought. Everyone does that every night during sleep. But this also happens to some extent through sex, alcohol, and other drugs that suppress excessive mind activity. If it weren't for alcohol, tranquilizers, antidepressants, as well as the illegal drugs, which are all consumed in vast quantities, the insanity of the human mind would become even more glaringly obvious than it is already. I believe that, if deprived of their drugs, a large part of the population would become a danger to themselves and others. These drugs, of course, simply keep you stuck in dysfunction. Their widespread use only delays the breakdown of the old mind structures and the emergence of higher consciousness. While individual users may get some relief from the daily torture inflicted on them by their minds, they are prevented from generating enough conscious presence to rise above thought and so find true liberation. I want to talk about this today because this is an epidemic that I've only discussed a little bit here on Biocadence, and that I think deserves much more attention. I will share a bit of my own personal story I know that I've shared here that I went through a number of years when my pain, both physical and psychological, was debilitating. I was physically disabled for right around 3 years, and I spent much of that time in bed or trying to move around, and then going back to giving up and troubleshooting how I might get out of that situation. And one of the things that doctors prescribed to me was painkillers. And thank goodness I was suspicious of them, because I was quickly able to distinguish how they were impacting me and my pain. It was quite clear to me that they were enhancing my pain, and that my body was creating pain in order to get more painkillers. And it, thank goodness, quickly became apparent to me how insane that is. And I used them so little that I began to contemplate how that may be for individuals who use them quite a bit. At that same time in my life, I had some personal encounters with other people who were using them quite a bit, and I was noting how it was changing their experience of the human condition so drastically. This is just one example amongst many. What I want to emphasize about this example, and what I want to lead into, is that in refraining from using these painkillers, which made sense to me from a number of different reflection points, given that I was detecting that they were increasing rather than decreasing my pain over time. In refraining from using them, I was able to maneuver toward a true expansion. And without that refraining, I am absolutely certain I would not have expanded. I would have constricted and constricted further and further. I know this. I think of the number of ways that we constrict and expand. I think of the number of different reasons that we engage in distraction, whether it be solely mental, by pushing down our myriad forms of pain or suffering, and saving them for later, suppressing them in our systems and distracting ourselves with something else. The most common form of this is television, and use of alcohol. And the use of alcohol polarized by the use of caffeine, morning, evening. Morning caffeine, evening alcohol. Television. Those are incredibly common forms of this distraction. And what we do when we suppress the pain or the sensations that are not optimal, the frustration, some of it might be at a very low degree or low intensity. When we push it down, even the low intensity of frustration, what we are ensuring is that it stays with us. It is not dispelled. It is not filtered through. It is not cleansed. It is buried, and it is encapsulated with more strength in our system. And so then, where does it come out? Many of us engage in further distraction, more intense distraction, constricting further and further and further, encapsulating the frustration or the pain more and more tightly as we suppress more and more of it. And as we reinforce the mechanisms, the cycles, the patterns of behavior and thought form that click together in our neural pathways, such that we glide down them with such ease, such that gliding down any other neural pathway becomes incredibly effortful, seemingly impossible maybe to some. There are other ways. And what I want to say is that they do involve effort and exertion and discipline. And they feel so wonderful. They are so worth our exertion and our effort. I would also share that they are easier. All in all, if I examine what's involved with dealing with the frustrations, the sufferings, the pains as they arise in the system, and everything that's involved in order to do that, all of what we may call sacrifices that we need to make in order to refrain from the distractions that we engage in, all of that, when patterned together, and I look at that as a whole of patterning, it is easier than engaging in the distractions and constricting further and further and further. Because what is involved in engaging in those distractions is the assurance that with each and every day, we will be less alive, less vibrant, less enforced by the source of our energy, less connected to other living forms of all types. And that patterning that allows for that vibrance and that energized connection, even considering the exertion that it involves, is what I would call ease-filled. Without further ado, I'll move on toward today's readings. Enjoy.
Page 8. Since every person carries the seed of enlightenment within, I often address myself to the knower in you who dwells behind the thinker, the deeper self that immediately recognizes spiritual truth, resonates with it, and gains strength from it. Page 12. The word enlightenment conjures up the idea of some superhuman accomplishment, and the ego likes to keep it that way. But it is simply your natural state of felt oneness with being. It is a state of connectedness with something immeasurable and indestructible, something that, almost paradoxically, is essentially you, and yet is much greater than you. It is finding your true nature beyond name and form. The inability to feel this connectedness gives rise to the illusion of separation from yourself and from the world around you. You then perceive yourself consciously or unconsciously as an isolated fragment. Fear arises, and conflict within and without becomes the norm. Page 15. Identification with your mind creates an opaque screen of concepts, labels, images, words, judgments, and definitions that blocks all true relationship. It comes between you and yourself, between you and your fellow man and woman, between you and nature, between you and God. It is the screen of thought that creates the illusion of separateness, the illusion that there's you and a totally separate other. You then forget the essential fact that underneath the level of physical appearances in separate forms, you are one with all that is. Page 28. Basically, all emotions are modifications of one primordial, undifferentiated emotion that has its origin in the loss of awareness of who you are beyond name and form. Because of its undifferentiated nature, it is hard to find a name that precisely describes this emotion. Fear comes close, but apart from a continuous sense of threat, it also includes a deep sense of abandonment and incompleteness. It may be best to use a term that is as undifferentiated as that basic emotion and simply call it pain. One of the main tasks of the mind is to fight or remove that emotional pain, which is one of the reasons for its incessant activity. But all it can ever achieve is to cover it up temporarily. In fact, the harder the mind struggles to get rid of the pain, the greater the pain. The mind can never find the solution, nor can it afford to allow you to find the solution, because it is itself an intrinsic part of the problem. Page 35. Accept, then act. Whatever the present moment contains, accept it as if you had chosen it. Always work with it, not against it. Make it your friend and ally, not your enemy. This will miraculously transform your whole life. As long as you are unable to access the power of now, every emotional pain that you experience leaves behind a residue of pain that lives on in you. It merges with the pain from the past, which was already there, and becomes lodged in your mind and body. And this, of course, includes the pain you suffered as a child, caused by the unconsciousness of the world into which you were born. And this accumulated pain is a negative energy field that occupies your body and mind. If you look on it as an invisible entity in its own right, you're getting quite close to the truth. It's the emotional pain body. Page 38. The pain body, which is the dark shadow cast by the ego, is actually afraid of the light of your consciousness. It is afraid of being found out. Its survival depends on your unconscious identification with it, as well as on your unconscious fear of facing the pain that lives in you. But if you don't face it, if you don't bring the light of your consciousness into the pain, you will be forced to relive it again and again. The pain body may seem to you like a dangerous monster that you cannot bear to look at, but I assure you that it is an insubstantial phantom that cannot prevail against the power of your presence. Page 43. The psychological condition of fear is divorced from any concrete and true immediate danger. It comes in many forms: unease, worry, anxiety, nervousness, tension, dread, phobia, and so on. This kind of psychological fear is always of something that might happen, not of something that is happening now. You are in the here and now, while your mind is in the future. And this creates an anxiety gap. And if you are identified with your mind and have lost touch with the power and simplicity of the now, that anxiety gap will be your constant companion. You can always cope with the present moment, but you cannot cope with something that is only a mind projection. You cannot cope with the future. Page 59. In the normal, mind-identified or unenlightened state of consciousness, the power and infinite creative potential that lie concealed in the now are completely obscured by psychological time. Your life then loses its vibrancy, its freshness, its sense of wonder. The old patterns of thought, emotion, behavior, reaction, and desire are acted out in endless repeat performances. a script in your mind that gives you an identity of sorts, but distorts or covers up the reality of the now. The mind then creates an obsession with the future as an escape from the unsatisfactory present. Page 76. Observe the many ways in which unease, discontent, and tension arise within you through unnecessary judgment, resistance to what is, and denial of the now. Anything unconscious dissolves when you shine the light of consciousness on it. Once you know how to dissolve ordinary unconsciousness, the light of your presence will shine brightly. It will be much easier to deal with deep unconsciousness whenever you feel its gravitational pull. However, ordinary unconsciousness may not be easy to detect initially because it is so normal. Page 88. Your outer journey may contain 1,000,000 steps. Your inner journey only has one. The step you're taking right now. As you become more deeply aware of this one step, you realize that it already contains within itself all the other steps, as well as the destination. And this one step then becomes transformed into an expression of perfection, an act of great beauty and quality. It will have taken you into being, and the light of being will shine through it. This is both the purpose and the fulfillment of your inner journey, the journey into yourself. Page 123. When you become identified more with the timeless inner body than with the outer body, when presence becomes your normal mode of consciousness and past and future no longer dominate your attention, you do not accumulate time anymore in your psyche and in the cells of the body. The accumulation of time as the psychological burden of past and future greatly impairs the cell's capacity for self-renewal. So if you inhabit the inner body, the outer body will grow old at a much slower rate. And even when it does, your timeless essence will shine through the outer form. It will not give the appearance of an old person. Page 141. What appears to us as space in our universe, perceived through the mind and the senses, is the unmanifested itself, externalized. It is the body of God. And the greatest miracle is this, that stillness and vastness that enables the universe to be is not just out there in space, it is also within you. When you are utterly and totally present, you encounter it as the still inner space of no mind. Within you, it is vast in depth, not an extension. Spatial extension is ultimately a misperception of infinite depth, an attribute of the one transcendental reality. Page 147. You get there by realizing that you are there already. You find God the moment you realize that you don't need to seek God. So there's no only way to salvation. Any condition can be used, but no particular condition is needed. However, there's only one point of access, the now. There can be no salvation away from this moment. You are lonely and without a partner? Enter the now from there. You're in a relationship? Enter the now from there. Page 157. The opportunity that is concealed within every crisis does not manifest until all the facts of any given situation are acknowledged and fully accepted. As long as you deny them, as long as you try to escape from them, or wish that things were different, the window of opportunity does not open up. You remain trapped inside that situation, which will remain the same or deteriorate further. Page 183. Through allowing the isness of all things, a deeper dimension underneath the play of opposites reveals itself to you as an abiding presence, an unchanging deep stillness, an uncaused joy beyond good and bad. This is the joy of being, the peace of God. On the level of form, there's birth and death, creation and destruction, growth and dissolution of seemingly separate forms. And this is reflected everywhere. In the life cycle of a star, a planet, a physical body, a tree, a flower, in the rise and fall of nations, political systems, civilizations, and in the inevitable cycles of gain and loss in the life of an individual. And there are cycles of success when things come to you and thrive, cycles of failure when they wither or disintegrate, and you have to let them go in order to make room for new things to arise or for transformation to happen. If you cling and resist at that point, it means you are refusing to go with the flow of life, and you will suffer. It is not true that the up cycle is good and the down cycle bad, except in the mind's judgment. Growth is usually considered positive, but nothing can grow forever. If growth, of whatever kind, were to go on, it would eventually become monstrous and destructive. Disillusion is needed for new growth to happen. One cannot exist without the other. Page 187. Things and conditions can give you pleasure, but they will also give you pain. Things and conditions can give you pleasure, but they cannot give you joy. Nothing can give you joy. Joy is uncaused and arises from within as the joy of being. It is an essential part of the inner state of peace, the state that has been called the peace of God. It is your natural state, not something that you need to work hard for or struggle to attain. Page 191. Don't become discouraged. There are as yet few people on the planet who can sustain a state of continuous presence, although some are getting close to it. Soon, I believe, there will be many more. Whenever you notice that some form of negativity has arisen within you, look on it not as a failure, but as a helpful signal that is telling you, wake up, get out of your mind, be present. Page 194. The moment you completely accept your non-peace becomes transmuted into peace. Anything you accept fully will get you there, will take you into peace. This is the miracle of surrender. Page 197. True compassion goes beyond empathy or sympathy. It does not happen until sadness merges with joy. The joy of being beyond form, the joy of eternal life. Page 203. All evils are the effect of unconsciousness. You can alleviate the effects of unconsciousness, but you cannot eliminate them unless you eliminate their cause. True change happens within, not without. If you feel called upon to alleviate suffering in the world, that is a very noble thing to do. But remember not to focus exclusively on the outer. Otherwise, you will encounter frustration and despair. Without a profound change in the human consciousness, the world's suffering is a bottomless pit. So don't let your compassion become one-sided. Empathy with someone else's pain or lack, and a desire to help need to be balanced with a deeper realization of the eternal nature of all life and the ultimate illusion of all pain. Then let your peace flow into whatever you do, and you will be working on the levels of effect and cause simultaneously. Page 213. If you resist or fight unconscious behavior in others, you become unconscious yourself. But surrender doesn't mean that you allow yourself to be used by unconscious people. Not at all. It is perfectly possible to say no firmly and clearly to a person, or to walk away from a situation and be in a state of complete inner non-resistance at the same time. When you say no to a person or a situation, let it come not from reaction, but from insight, from a clear realization of what is right or not right for you at that moment. Let it be a non-reactive no, a high-quality no, a no that is free of all negativity and so creates no further suffering. Page 217. Surrender does not transform what is, at least not directly. Surrender transforms you. When you are transformed, your whole world is transformed because the world is only a reflection. I'm on page 224, and this will be the final passage I read from this book. God is being itself, not a being. There can be no subject-object relationship here, no duality, no you and God. God realization is the most natural thing there is. The amazing and incomprehensible fact is not that you can become conscious of God, but that you are not conscious of God.